So what's up, guys? Welcome back. This is part 2 of the video that I made recently called just my reactions to what was going on with George Floyd, the George Floyd murder, and the protests and the riots and the looting. And today is really more of what I teased toward the end of that video, where I DM'd on a lot of my friends, or as much as I could, and try to get their reactions to what's been going on. And especially I wanted to DM my friends who were not black and who were not black, non-black person of color and white people, because I wanted to get that reaction. I wanted to see what they were, how they think about this, because since due to the recent mobilizations and the protests, seeing way more people that just not black people there, it has me thinking about what are their roles in this movement. So, without further ado, because the video is going to be really long, let's just get started. Number 1, why do you think people that are not black stay silent? So I asked this question because I guarantee, like I said in the last video, I guarantee people just didn't all of a sudden now realize with George Floyd and with Breonna Taylor that there is racism in the Black Lives Matter community. There's racism in the black community. Like I don't think, I named a couple high profile murders of black people by the hands of the police in the last video. So I guarantee people have not just for the first time heard about this stuff, and racism is pretty drenched in North American society, especially in the United States. But the consistent message I got from at least the people who answered this question, was that they knew at a surface level of what was going on in the black community, especially black people's relationship with the police. And the growing answer I got from a lot of people was the growing answer I got from a lot of people was that, oh, this is not my place to speak, or this is a black and white issue, or something along the line. That's what they believed. That's what they believed. And I wanted to actually get my response to that. And my response to that is when will it be your place to speak? If you're not black, like I said in the other video, if you're not black, you're not gonna know, and you're never gonna fully understand what's going on in the black community. However, if you're not a activist who dedicates a lot of their life to black inequality and racism towards black people, if you're not somebody who's a professor that his job is to teach this stuff, then you're never gonna be 100% educated. But that right now isn't important. When people say, "Oh, this isn't my place," how come? You're never gonna have all the information. You're never gonna have all the instance. But if you're somebody who's entrenched in black culture, has black friends, black family member, dates black people, has black children, then this is also your right to speak. And you know what? It's okay that you don't know everything. It's okay that you don't know all the answers. It's not about what you know, it's about what you feel. And what you feel, if you feel this is wrong and your willingness to learn, that is important. That's the important thing in all of this. This appeal to authority, because that's what it is. It's appeal to authority. It's basically, if you're not involved in it, then you don't speak about it. You mostly hear this in political debates. And this appeal to authority that we use it for, it's really to devalue people's emotions. It silences people's emotions because you make them feel like they're too stupid to know the conversation. You don't need to be an activist to know that killing unarmed black men or unarmed black women for nothing is wrong. This hunting that the police force has towards black people is wrong. You don't need to be a politician. You don't need to be an activist to know that. Most people look at this as a black and white issue, but the original civil rights movement helped get other communities, help make it easier to migrate to the U.S. and migrate to these places so they can escape the issues that were going on in their homelands. So this is an everybody's fight. No, we love, we love to see black excellence on our TV screens. We love to see black excellence on our phones. We love to see black excellence, through the eyes of the media and entertainment and, in our society. But many people do not do anything to help raise the bar, help raise the floor for black people. What felt like an eternity ago, like we were giving all our Sunday nights to Michael Jordan during the Last Dance doc. Just, at the beginning of quarantine, everybody was doing the Savage Dance or doing the Tuesday slide on TikTok and throughout social media. People have been begging for NBA basketball to return. But the reality is this, that many of these communities that aren't the non-black people of color, many of these communities have the same microaggressions that white people have towards black people, because they're more accepted by white people than black people are. Like I said earlier, if you're someone who's entrenched in black culture, in trying to dress like black music artists, trying to, you're listening to the music, you listen to the music, eating the food, eating the cuisine. If you have black friends, black family members, black children, date black people, this is your fight also. But however, I kind of want to get into the response of my friend Caelin. I think he actually gave a good response. I don't want to read it out. So I have it pulled up. Let me read it out. I think the most common thing that I've heard is that people don't believe in the Black Lives Matter movement because all lives matter, or black lives don't matter any more than anybody else. I also have heard things like it's a black issue, so who am I to speak on it? And to be honest, I felt the same way for a while too. Like, if it wasn't my place to speak, but I believe that the willingness to shut up about it comes from either a place of deep ignorance or a lack of empathy. What made me want to start voicing my opinions was that the deep, dark, horrible feeling in my chest and stomach that comes from watching people suffer. I see the videos of police brutality, abuses of power, murders, lynchings, and it makes me sick to my stomach. And then you have to think about all the stuff that's not on video, the stuff we don't witness, and you think about all the nameless people who were taken. You think about how with every tragedy, the pain of generations of black people is brought to the surface, and how helpless these people must feel every single time this shit happens. I see this pain everywhere, even in my small town of Pickering. We had a protest that I was able to attend, and the show was incredible. One thing that spoke to me though, that was that there was not a single black person who drove by that didn't celebrate the protesters. I don't think I expected anything different, but I think to me it just showed how widespread the problem and the pain is. Now I know that the Asian community has been scrutinized for the silence or unwillingness to help or general xenophobic tendencies, and I feel like a lot of that comes from all the flack they caught for COVID. Basis on conversations I've heard/had, I feel like the Asian community is really focusing on their own issues, but as an indigenous person, I know that getting in on the conversation is so important. One of the things that I noticed after the death of George Floyd was that the same people who were really outspoken about black issues and Black Lives Matter and the Black Lives Matter movement were also really outspoken for the indigenous issues and the fight for missing and murdered indigenous women. I'm not gonna lie. I learned more about my culture in the first week of the riots than I did in my 20 years on this earth. But that sense of unity is what we need right now. Everybody needs to be on the conversation. We all need to stand up for each other in our times of need. And right now, black people need our help. We all should be equal, but in the world we live in right now, that's not the way that people are being treated. I think if everyone could see through their privileges and realize that, we wouldn't be hearing any more of this all lives matter bullshit. Okay, so one of the things that that he said was basically what I said earlier, but also the term all lives matter, which I already explained in my other video. Like, all lives matter all lives cannot matter until black lives start mattering. But one thing that he said, because he's also somebody from a small town in Ontario, and he's also somebody that went to one of the protests in his community, and one of the things that I wanted to point out is that, and I think this point is really important. One of the first things that I noticed after the death of George Floyd was that the same people who were really outspoken about black issues and the Black Lives Matter movement were also really outspoken about the indigenous issues and the fight for missing and murdered indigenous women. I'm sorry, I don't know what STG stands for. I swear to God, I learned more about my culture in the first week of the riots than I did in my 20 years on this earth. So that's another thing. One thing that I can recognize is that, if you're not from Canada, we basically, in kind of a Spark Notes way of explaining it, is how Americans treated black people is how Canadians treated indigenous people for like years, like up until like probably the late 90s. And the thing that I caught was that the thing that I saw was that the same people that would speak up for indigenous women, the same people that would speak up for the Black Lives Matter movement, were the same people that were speaking up for indigenous people, and the constant pressure of politicians that help and find murdered and missing indigenous women, which is a big problem that goes on in Canada. So so that's the thing, just because you are not, and that goes back to my point that I made earlier. Just because you're somebody that is not in this particular culture doesn't mean that you can't feel empathy towards that issues. And that's what he even also mentioned in his reply, that him not speaking up felt like he was selling himself short in a way, because it was either a lack of deep ignorance or a lack of empathy. That's important to this cause. You speak up not because you can relate. You speak up because you know it's the right thing to do, and you know what happened was wrong. It's as simple as that. Like, you don't need a degree to know what's right and what's wrong. It's as simple as that. Okay, question 2. Were there parts of the Black Lives Matter movement that you didn't, or other protests similar in nature that you did not understand over the years? So I asked 3 people, similar, I asked 3 people, and the response, with the mass protests and the reach of this movement and the reach of the issues that are being brought to the forefront, I should say, there's definitely a shift in what people think of the Black Lives Matter movement, but there's still people who misconstrue it. There's still people that throw out things from simple criticisms or simple misunderstandings to misinformation about it, and it's hard to really figure out which one is which. So, an overall sense of that people just simply don't know what black people are fighting for. However, the responses that I got, they all ranged kind of differently. Like, all the responses I got were kind of all different in circumstance. So I'm going to give each one of them its time. The first one was from one of my friends, and I'm going to keep it real. It's kind of what I've been explaining earlier, that he just doesn't understand why people are making a black on white issue, and that we in this time need unity. And although, yes, I understand this is not a black and white issue, I think everyone understands that this isn't a black and versus white issue. This is an everybody versus bigots issue. But, obviously the relationship between black people and white people is very deep, and the relationship has been scarred potentially for life. There's black people that will never fully trust white people. That's a reality. That's just a reality. That's a reality, and white people have to, really show that they are for black lives. And I'm going to get for this movement, for not just the movement, but the message that it's trying to send. And honestly, his answer, I explain it more in another question that I have later on, so I'm going to get to that later on. But 2 people gave me answers that were really important, and I want to give each of their answers each of their responses their own significant amount of time. So let's get started. The first one was from my friend Sammi. So let me just put this out there. So basically I'm gonna put her response up on the screen, and I think her response was as simple as, I think the main thing that was confusing was with the riots and the breaking into stores. How that action does not help Black Lives Matter and the movement. Black Lives Matter and the movement in any way. But rather just inflict more violence, fear, and worsen the image of Black individuals, because that is legal, and by following you basically are not only a thief now, but you're making matters for Black Lives Matter worse. I am not well in. Okay, so that's basically it. That's basically her response, and I want to get into that response because that's the response that is pretty heavy on social media right now. That's the response that's overall dominating a lot of talks. Obviously, after this happened and everything else that's been happening in America, protests and riots broke out, which was understandable. We get that. And then looting is the graduation of rioting. And and especially because I watch, if you know Pat McAfee and Andrew Schultz, they kind of had the same sentiment as her on the topic of looting. And personally, when I've heard this response, because this is a response that's very popular, and it's not just her, like many people have this exact same response on social media. When I hear this response, I do have to try my hardest to not, full out get angry or get riled up when I hear this response, because on the surface, it's an understandable thing. It's understandable to be especially if you're not Black, it's super understandable to look at the rioting, look at the looting, and just think like, this is not going to help because this is breaking the law, you're provoking. And I've had to rile myself back from getting angry. I even had to rile myself back from getting angry at her. But I wanted to explain a little bit. This topic of saying, oh, it's hurting the image, or don't provoke them because it's going to lead to more violence. They don't need to be provoked. Like, they don't need to be provoked. Clearly as hell. They do not need to be provoked in order for a Black person to lose their life. Literally, Breonna Taylor was shot, 8 times for sleeping in her fucking home. And I think the cops got the wrong fucking house. So they just broke into some random couple's house and killed the woman that was sleeping. Just saying. I'm just saying. No, we can clearly see videos all over social media of police officers instigating the violence. They're causing some of the destruction. The original, Target in Minneapolis that got burnt down was caused by an undercover white officer. So, we see these videos of cops planting bricks, instigating some of the violence, doing some of the violence, doing some of the destruction of property, and then when peaceful protests have been peaceful for the most part, the cops are escalating the situation by throwing tear gas, by shooting people with rubber bullets. Then not even rubber bullets, rubber coated bullets. There's a difference. Officers are instigating the virus, basically grabbing people from the crowd and arresting them for nothing. We saw a Black journalist for CNN on live TV be arrested for just standing in front of the officers and being recorded for his news channel. So, you know what I'm saying? So clearly, police officers do not need to be provoked. No one needs to be provoked here. Ahmaud Arbery, his situation, he was jogging, and then three white people with shotguns were following him. So clearly, they don't need to be provoked. And people talk about it's hurting the image. They've already had this image. They've already had this image of Black people. a lot of police officers have always not liked the black people, and now they're given a gun, they're given a overarching amount of responsibility and an overarching amount of privilege with minimal training and bigoted views, and they're doing more in communities that don't have other outlets to go to. So they're pretty much, police officers are essentially the only social workers in these communities, and they're told that these people are dangerous. You know, they're being told that it's a coded, rooted environment that are being told, that is telling that black people are criminals. They are dangerous. So, what do you think they're gonna do? Especially now they have all this access to all this extra equipment. You know, there's peaceful protests, and they're dressing like they're going to war. So, let me just put that out there. Oh, and then add that to how the media portrays and how they talk about black people, and how they always talked about black people and black protests. And then it gets funneled to communities that don't have that many black people, or don't have that many interactions with black people, and the next person's response is actually going to be indicative of this. You basically get the perfect storm. So at this stage, black people truly don't care about how they look to everybody else. I run a video game channel. This is a video game channel. When you rage, it's not like you're taking, this control is nice, this is nice, I don't want to break it. You just take a control and smash against the fucking wall. Not because you know better not to do that, but you're angry at this point. You're angry at this point. You're lashing out at this point. Black people are lashing out. They are frustrated. They are tired of having to go on their phones, go on Twitter, and then watch the brutalization after brutalization, murder after murder of their people for nothing. Okay? This is just people. It's black people being fucking frustrated. One of the videos that I watched on social media, and it was probably one of the most, it's so special. Like, if I can find it, I'll put it on the screen right now. It was, it was three guys. It was a protest, and it was one guy who was I think 46, and then there was another guy who's 31, and then there's another guy who was 16, and then the 31-year-old goes to the 16-year-old and holds him like, yo, you have to be the change. You have to be the change, because clearly what we're doing is not working. This is generational stress. This is generational sorrow. This is generational sadness. This is generational frustration. So at this point, fam, they don't give a fuck about no Target. They don't give a fuck about no Walmart. They don't give a fuck about no Lenox Mall, no Gucci store. They don't give a fuck about that. They don't own any of them places. They don't own it. Fuck them. Like, black people right now, during the looting and during the riot, did not care about property that they did not own. They did not and do not own, actually. Rioting is the language of the oppressed. They're the language of the desperate, of the people who want to be heard, and they're going to do it by any means necessary. And the question is, why can't people peacefully protest? Why can't they peacefully protest? Because they have. After the deaths of people like Terrence Crutcher or Samuel Du Bois, black people took to the streets and nothing fucking got done. And honestly, until I watched Andrew Schultz's piece on this, I didn't even know this fucking happened. Okay? I didn't even know black people. I didn't even know who those two were. I heard of Samuel Du Bois, or at very least I heard about one of these two. But the fact that I didn't even know anything about any protests that were going on clearly shows that the peacefulness of that protest didn't reach. Black people took to the streets after the deaths of Philando Castile, Eric Gardner, Michael Brown, Sandra Bland, Laquan McDonald, Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin. And nothing got done. Nothing changed. So what are you going to do? What would you do? Used up all your peaceful protesting. You used up all your restraint. How long are you going to peacefully protest for? After 1 year? After 5 years? After 10 years? 100 years? 60 years? Wait, how long would you do it? You know? How long? 400 years? Like, how long? All the riots of the past, whether it be the hold on, let me read these out. You know, all the riots of the past, whether it be the Harlem riots of '64 or the Watts riots of '65. If I got any of these wrong, please correct me in the comment section. Or the riots after MLK's assassination, or the LA riots of '92, or the Baltimore Ferguson riots of 2015. Like, and well, now they all have one thing in common, outside of the MLK, but still, brings to the point. You know, how can you threaten, kill, beat, dehumanize, and disenfranchise a group of people for generations, and then tell them how they should react, and tell them what they should and should not be offended by, what they should and should not be outraged for? And, like, really, realistically, black people have been out here protesting and trying to negotiate the fact that they deserve life. That's a human issue. That's not a race issue. That's a fucking human issue. And that brings me to the looting. And looting is a graduation of rioting, as I said. And although, I can't condone it, because I understand there's many companies, many businesses that are going to get caught in the crossfire that got nothing to do with this shit. There are going to be a lot of businesses that are going to get caught in the crossfire and they have to deal with collateral damage. A lot of these businesses are also, I'm not even say a lot of them, I don't know, but some of the businesses could be of immigrants, of first generation immigrants. So I understand this could be stressful. And I also believe that not everyone that's going to the protest have the same motive. I'm not dumb. Like, I understand that there are going to be people who are going to go there for their own ulterior motives. Maybe they just want to watch the world burn. Maybe they just want to get in on some of the destruction. Maybe they just want some free shit. I don't fucking know. Maybe they have their own agenda that they have. I can't say for sure. However, I don't condemn it. I don't condemn what's been happening with the protests, because personally, it's just the perfect storm. Like, I could see it's the perfect storm, and it's a cumulative of many other factors that, obviously don't have all to do with George Floyd's death. Currently, right now, we're in the middle of a pandemic that is disproportionately killing many more black people for other factors, like many black people living in America, living in low-funded hospital. Not what am I saying? Many black people can only go to one. There's only like one or two grocery stores in their entire community, or the fact that the hospitals that are tending in these communities are low-funded, or many of these people don't have access to health insurance. It's a lot of other reasons, and we're in a pandemic that has caused over 44 million Americans to currently apply for unemployment, which is the most since like the Depression era. Like, black people are more likely to be working an essential job, and obviously I know that depending on where you live, the term essential could mean something totally different. But black people are more likely to be working an essential job. However, they're more likely to be fired or laid off from their place of employment. So they get hired at a lesser rate, fired at a higher rate. So yeah, and also I want to throw in a point about things. One of my other friends' comments, and who replied to that question, and I think one of the reasons why the relationship between black and white people historically has been scarce is because when white people see the riots, they see the looting, they see the protests, they immediately think, I feel like not all white people, but a certain amount of white people believe what has historically happened to black people will happen to them when they see those acts of rebellion, or those acts of rioting or looting and things of that nature. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. And I want to get into Lucia's comments. Now, Lucia, you're gonna, if everything goes well, you're gonna hear her voice because she sent me a voice memo. However, if it doesn't, I'll still explain it anyway.
Necessarily say about that because, like, I don't know, to my understanding, like, I feel like I did understand, like, the BLM movement. However, I think the only thing I would have to say would be, like, it wasn't very, I don't know how to explain it. You know how, like, usually protests, like, they have, like, one goal, like, in mind? Like, not the problem, but the thing is with the BLM movement, like, it's so large. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's so much that, you know, they're fighting for, or, like, the point that they're fighting for, like, equality, right? It has so much, like, what's it called? Like, points under it, right? So it's not like one thing, like, oh, okay, the right to vote, the right for this, the right for that. It's, like, a lot of different points under it. So it's hard to know, like, what exactly are the steps, right, to get stuff accomplished, right? Now they have abolished the police, and that's, like, okay, that's, like, a more, like, clear goal. I don't know if you'd be interested, but I could, like, type out maybe things that people here are, like, unaware of, like, my family, like, especially, like, even, like, older generations, right? Just in Costa Rica in general, like, it's crazy. Like, the ignorance here is crazy regarding it, and, like, even our media, like, our television channels are showing the protests. And, like, you know what I mean? Most people don't know anything about what happened prior to it, like taking a knee, all that stuff. And so the media is painting it in such a bad light. I mean, like, I can speak on that a bit. However, like, over the years, I don't know. Just what I said in, like, the last audio, I could type that out. And let me know if this is on topic too, because there's another point. Like, over the years, I didn't not really understand, but kind of frustrated me, right? And I think that has to do with, like, the whole separating, like, black rights from, like, indigenous rights, and or like indigenous slash Hispanic rights. And my only thing with that was that, you know, there's so much division in a time where they're, like, you know, always, right, in a time where there's been unity. And, you know, personally, I just feel like when that whole Chick-fil-A, like, last year, right, I was saying, like, yo, Chick-fil-A supporting Trump's putting Hispanics in cages, this, that, and the third. And then just now, you know, people are, what's it called, like, boycotting it, right? Like, no one gave a fuck when it was Hispanic people, but, you know, now that it's black people. So it's like, you know what I mean? Like, we should have been working together from the jump. You see what I mean? And now I'm seeing, like, this thing, like, oh, people of color, like, the term should be, you know, that term is just for minorities who want to hop in on oppression, right? And the thing is, people don't recognize that there's a lot of oppression with, like, indigenous communities, and it goes hands in hand because every step that black people take, they have also taken a step for indigenous people or Hispanic people. And also, like, just the societies are so integrated, and I just really feel like there should be you know, a more, what's it called, a more cohesive thing. Because yes, anyway, so that, like, the exclusion, the, like, putting down people, like, the trying to, like, take people out of, like, the movement, it's like, I don't know if you know who Pinball Clemens is, right? But I remember he always told me, like, he was always like, how, you know, the way you get a movement to move forward is by making people feel like they're included. And I just feel like that's, you know, that's such a smart move, because at the end of the day, like, we the people, like, do you know what I mean? Like, we have the power, and, like, you know, if people, like, if people linked up more, like, this I personally feel like this would have gone further in the past even. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, you know what I mean? From time, like, people have been saying, like, you know, boycott these companies because they're doing this to indigenous people, boycott these communities because they're doing this to X and X community, right? And it's like, if everyone had just taken in that these businesses and these communities are are racist, period, and like everyone has just canceled them from the jump, right? Like, wouldn't that have made like more progress, right? Like I feel like the only way to, make people change is to make their pockets hurt. But yeah, that's the only like negative sentiment I've ever had like towards the cause. But everything else so far that I know of about the movement, I've been in agreement with. Even the looting, like everything, like rob these motherfuckers. Like I don't give a fuck. Like, like yo, y'all rob people of their freedom. Y'all rob people of their land. Y'all rob people of everything. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't give a fuck. You sent indigenous people to a next part where no one even lives. You grew black people and Hispanics into, communities, told them what schools to go to, give them the lesser schools, you know, fuck you, you know what I mean? Like, you're complaining about people building down the prison you built for them. Fuck you. So, I don't know, this is getting long. I don't know, let me even know if, like, the other part was even on topic, though, because I didn't even know, like, that really doesn't have anything. Well, it does, but not really. You see what I mean? Like, the whole indigenous people, like, I feel like that's like a separate point. But what I was trying to say with all that is that I just feel like there should have, like, instead of people focusing their energy on trying to divide minorities up, that people should find strength in that, and that they should, overcome this struggle together to defeat the majority, which is white people. And also, it adds a lot of confusion for Afro Latinos and for light skinned people, because I don't know, personally, like, right, like I've had friends who are like uncomfortable with the movement because, like, they feel like, oh, I'm not pro-black because, my mom's white, or like, oh, I'm not, I can't possibly be pro-black because my culture isn't the same, because even though I'm black, I'm also Latino. And so it just sucks when a movement that's supposed to bring positivity and unity and is also bringing division, and like that I don't stand.
So basically, her two biggest takeaways from not understanding the Black Lives Matter movement was two. First was that she didn't really know what the actual objective was. She didn't know the objective of the movement, because she compares it to other protests like LGBTQ protests or women's rights protests, where it was a common goal. There was a problem, and they were looking for a solution. That was the goal. For black people, for the Black Lives Matter movement, the thing is just saying the right to live. And so you really don't know, like, what stroke are they using the brush for? Like, what are they actively fighting for? And I think the second one was the amount of division in other minority groups, and she used the examples of indigenous people, and she used the example of LGBTQ again. So I saying that, like, she used the example of Chick-fil-A. Actually, she used the example of Chick-fil-A, where last year I believe, Chick-fil-A, there've been protests and rallies, people saying that Chick-fil-A supports Donald Trump. Chick-fil-A supports and funds and donates to gay conversion or reversion camps. I think those are what they're called. If I'm wrong, leave it in the comment section. Like gay reversion camps and shit like that. And those and that was wrong, and people were protesting, but people were calling them pussies or sensitive or snowflakes, or you're overly sensitive or triggered. And then all of a sudden now we're canceling businesses or associations, or taking our dollar and going somewhere else to businesses that support Donald Trump and things of that nature, like Wendy's, Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, what else? And taking our dollar and actively calling out companies, and we're calling out companies that say they are for Black Lives Matter with their PR written up statements, using the same app that I probably use to make those same written letters, but then are not practicing what they preach. So places like Starbucks, for an example, we came together that we could have gotten way more done in the time that we had, and there's a lot of division between minority groups, even though some Black people overlap in some of these minority groups like LGBTQ and things of that nature. So obviously my response to that when I first heard it, and those are valid, those are really valid, not criticism, but just like understanding and awareness. I think one of the first things is that, because the thing with the Black Lives Matter movement is that, something I said in my first video when I made talking about how Black people have been saying that there's been racism in all walks of life for them for years. I think the reality of this situation is that Black people, for the most part, have to deal with racism in all forms of life. And, not just in the police force, even though the Black Lives Matter movement started with an unarmed Black man being killed by the hands of the police. And Black Lives Matter movement, yes, it is broad, because they're protesting not only police injustice and police reform and things of that nature, they're also protesting for Black people to have the right to live, the right to live. The term driving while Black, walking while Black is an actual thing. So, with Black people, they're protesting for the right to live. And for other protests, that has never really been the case, or at least the ones that she referenced. For women's rights protests, it was the right to vote. For LGBTQ protests or LGBT protests, it was the right to be seen as members of society. For Black people, it's the right to live. And the right to live is a broad sense because, yes, it is broad. It's the right to have access to good education, the right to have access to good health care, the right to have access into good housing, the right to have access into good jobs, the right to have access into a stable neighborhood and a stable community. On top of everything about police injustice. So yes, it is broad sense because it is supposed to be broad sense. It's supposed to be a broad view because that's the reality. Black people don't feel like they have the right to live and the right to opportunities in a country that's supposed to be championing that. So the protests are all over the place because every Black person is fighting for a common goal, but the reasonings for the fight vary. They vary. There is racism in the healthcare system. There is racism in the schooling system. There is racism in the housing market. There is racism in the entertainment sector, healthcare system, judicial system, the prison system. So there's so many layers of racism that is embedded within American culture to the point where, Black people don't think they have the right to live. Because, basically how America is trying to correct racism is just kind of putting a blanket over it and then just pretending it's not there anymore. So Black people want these issues and these problems that were made by choice to be acted on, to be held, to be changed, to include them. With LGBTQ people, it was the fact that they weren't even seen, so they wanted just rights. Black people, they want the rights that America says are there. They want it to be acted upon. And currently, it's not acted upon, which is why people are protesting and rioting right now. or at least protesting now at the time of making this video. And for the second part of her reply, I think one of the things that have pissed off black people, I'm not gonna lie, it's pissed me off over the last couple of years too, is that we are constantly being told to share our oppression and share our protesting with everybody else. We have to always include everybody else. And, you know, like, and that kind of goes back to a kind of a form of All Lives Matter, even though this one definitely does come from a better place. It's like, you know, black people can't even fight for their own oppression and their own rights because they have to always include everybody else. They have to always include minority, to include indigenous people. They have to always include Latino people. They have to always include Muslims. They have to include everybody. And although, yes, I understand, black people can also be in the LGBTQ community. Black people can also be Muslim. I understand that. One of the things that, but what pisses a lot of people off is that, like, why is it that when we want to speak about black lives and we want to speak about black inequality, we always have to talk about something else? You know, when people say Black Lives Matter, yes, all Black Lives Matter. All Black Lives Matter. Black LGBTQ members matter. Black Muslims matter. You know, black sex workers matter. You know what I'm saying? These people matter. All black lives should matter. And it's not even saying that, no, black people can't speak about it, because I said earlier in my friend Caelin's response, where the same black people that were talking about that speak up for black issues, they also speak up for indigenous people. They also speak up for racism towards Asian people. They also speak up towards racism towards brown people. You know, the same people that speak up for the same black people that speak up for our issues speak up for other people's issues too. But when it's specifically time to speak about black people, we have to always include everybody else. I think that's what pisses black people off. And, you know, a lot of politicians in America, just in Canada also, a lot of politicians have this view that, you know, a rising tide, if we make one legislation, it's a rising legislation or a law or pass a bill, a rising tide will lift all boats. But now black people want to know right now, what are you going to specifically do for us? What do you want to specifically do for us? Because your people of your skin color, people in the same seat that you hold, made laws, passed bills, you know, created stigma that we were subhuman. Now we want change that specifically includes us. And yes, it probably will help other communities as well. You know, it will probably help other communities, but we want to make sure that you recognize it and you act on our voices. That's all it is. And it is right that, you know, we do split up a lot of the minority, a lot of the, you know, the struggles. But I think another thing is that, you know, the history is just simply different. That's what I was saying. And also I think, like, because another thing, especially because she did bring up a good point about how people weren't making a big deal when LGBTQ people were saying that, you know, there's, you know, this company, this brand of Chick-fil-A is actively funding programs that look to destroy gay people, destroy trans people. And I think a lot of the issues that stand is that people, I think it's also a stigma to our LGBTQ people. That's obviously the case. And I think, and the common trope that I've always heard was, hey, it's just a chicken sandwich. It's just a chicken sandwich. It's just a restaurant. And I think one of the things that really started to be revealing, especially over the last couple of weeks, is that pretty much how embedded racism is into our culture. You know, how embedded racism is to cultures, into our day-to-day life. Like, you know, you see Quaker wanting to remove the Aunt Jemina branding off the pancake batter, the maple syrups and stuff like that, because of its ties to racism. Or now, you know, as I was making this video, you know, day 3 or day 2 of making this video, there's women, the Washington Redskins are now, for the first time in like seems like forever, are considering changing the name of the team. And people have been calling for the Redskins to change their name for years now, like for years now. So it's a fact of people are now finally to realize that some of the shit is just simply wrong. It's simply wrong to glorify racism and normalize racism. You know, you see people taking down statues. You see people, people are calling for street names to be changed because of their ties to slavery. And, it's like, how the fuck did we keep this up for so long? And you guys probably knew this was racist. I think it's just simple, like, people are now finally starting to realize that, we've glorified racism so much that it's just so embedded to our day-to-day culture. It goes back to, I remember something Beyonce said. I don't remember what award show she was at. It was like, racism is so embedded into American culture is that when you feel like, so when you're fighting racism, people feel like you're fighting America. No shit, for God's sakes, then NASCAR just announced that they're going to stop flying the Confederate flag at their races. And I also want to bring up with, in terms of LGBTQ, also in the Chick-fil-A protests, and people protesting against Chick-fil-A, was that people, the reality is there's a lot of, homophobia in the black community. There's a lot of homophobia in the black community. So I feel like that is also, it was a hindering to that protest, but it's not saying that people didn't care. There's black people that did not care. That's definitely not the case. There's people who do care. It was just that people couldn't look past that to look past the wrong, but people can look at what companies are doing for the Black Lives Matter movement, because it's something that has been actively affecting America. It's been affecting North America for generations. So I think that's kind of it. But this was probably one of the most, one of the best responses I got of all the questions I asked, because it was a nice way to kind of reflect. So yeah. Have you seen someone experience racism, or have you experienced discrimination over your skin color or your race or who you're with? Because people who are not black are going to have different experiences. Non-black people of color would have different experiences with racism. At the end of the day, people will have much different experiences with racism. And all these people that I asked grew up in a city, kind of like me, Toronto, where black culture has heavily influenced, has influenced the entire city. So, and most of the answers I got were that they personally never experienced any overt levels of racism. So, like someone hurling a racial slur at them. However, they've experienced, or if they've seen someone they know experience covert forms of racism. One of my friends, he said that he's never experienced any racism, or he's never held any of these views because, he grew up in a pretty diverse neighborhood. However, he knows of his parents that held those, probably not his parents, but like his grandparents or people that were back home in his homeland, which was the Philippines, or his home country, which is the Philippines, that held these views towards black people. And that's obviously the case, because people pass down their ideals, especially if it's passed down in an environment which is comfortable and nobody checks them. So that's, nobody checks them, nobody educates them. So that's not unlikely to hear that someone older in your family holds biased, prejudiced views towards another group of people, and especially black people if they're not black. However, another friend said that she saw her friend experience some levels of bias or prejudice because they were both in school, and and I know this girl because I went to school with her last year, and she was taking the same program again, and she basically was with her friend, and her friend was going through some mental health issues. She was really struggling keeping up with the schoolwork, and she was asking our our program coordinator if some suggestions or anything like that. The program coordinator basically told her to, just basically just drop out essentially and try again next year, while a white student who had similar mental health struggles was afforded all the help that she needed. Now, funny enough, oddly enough, like I said, I went to school with this girl. I was in the same program as her last year. Shit, I know the program coordinator she's talking about, and I had the same issues last year. That's why I took a year off this year. And that was not my experience when I was there last year, because I dealt with the same mental health problems, and I was afforded, a lot of the help that I needed. And, so personally, without fully knowing this girl that she's referring to, because I'm gonna be honest with you, I know, like I said, I know the person that I asked, but I don't know the girl she's talking about. So without knowing her, I can't fully tell what it is. But however, this is something that happens a lot. This is something that happens a lot in the Black community, where our struggles, our pain, our frustration gets minimized. Calling us crazy, calling us, you're being hysterical, this, that, and third, and you're not even. So people hold that view, and now you're not even getting the help that you need. You're not even getting the basic help that you need. And this happens in the healthcare community. This happens in the schooling system. A Black kid, he's dealing with certain frustrations, certain things of that. And sure, he may lash out, or she may lash out, and then they're getting detention. They're getting expelled. They're getting suspended. They possibly getting expelled. While a white student or another student has those same lashes out, those same fits of anger, but they're afforded the opportunity to speak it out or have counseling and this, that, and the third. And especially with Black people talking about their mental health struggles. Black people talking about their mental health struggles, and a lot of people, whether they want to admit it or not, they have the views that Black people are naturally tougher. They can handle it, stuff like that, and they just have to fight through it. So they're not even. I want to get into my friend Mary's response, because my friend Mary, she said that she didn't experience any forms of racism, at least that what she knows, but she's seen her friend experience like covert microaggressions. I asked her, like, hey, can you define this? And she basically said that, a guy came up to her, they're talking, yada yada, and then something happens, and then, he says that, you're really cute for a Black girl. And, Black women and Black girls' experiences with racism is going to be totally different. Or no, I don't even say totally different, but like it's going to be different from Black men, because oftentimes Black men get fetishized in our culture, in our society, but Black women do get dehumanized. They get demonized for their features, for their looks, for their appeal. A lot, and especially talking to a lot of my friends, there's black women that literally think when they see a guy and they they kind of have feelings for that guy, and then they have to think in their head, oh my gosh, does he like Black girls? Does he like Black girls? And or a Black woman being criticized and being demonized, being called ghetto, being called ratchet, trashy for her features, for her aesthetic, but then another person, maybe a non-Black person of color or a white girl, can do the same features, like dyeing their hair, maybe perming their hair a little, so leaving it like in a mini afro, curls, certain looks, certain aesthetics that are more known for Black women. They do it, and then they're being called different. It's kind of like when people talk about cultural appropriation. And I think one of the why people are mad, and I've seen mostly Black women being angry at this, and it's not because they're using a style, they're using a hairstyle, or using a certain aesthetic or a certain feature that are specifically for Black women, or more known for Black women. It's literally the sense of, when we do it, like let's say a black girl comes with her hair braided or something like that. They can potentially be dehumanized. They're not taken seriously. It's called ghetto. It's ugly. It's ratchet. They could potentially even lose their job or may not be qualified for a job for having that. But a non-black person of color or a white girl can do the same look, can braid her hair, and it's revolutionary. Or it's so cute. It's so different. It's so unique. And that's an aggression. That's anger. That's frustration. And I could, black women being fetishized and being looked at as an experiment, or if you're maybe a lighter skinned black girl, you're not even looked at as black, and it's something that I had to really think about, and it was something that I'm still thinking about. It's an aggression that is valid. It's aggression that's warranted. And I'm still learning about it, so it's like, I'm not the best person to talk about this. But it is an extra insecurity that black women do carry that I don't think other races carry, because for years of how black women are, especially in the entertainment sector that I was talking about earlier, how black women are kind of, for years, how black women were portrayed in mainstream culture. They're either the angry black woman, or the ratchet black woman, or they were stupid, they were dumb, they were whatever this case may be. So, so it's like they don't even, so the representation's not even there, and this gets fun. People hold those same ideals. So when they see a black woman out in public, either you don't even want to look her way because of the stigma that you carry, or you think about it as, she's not even like, or you look at her almost not even as a woman, you look at her as an experiment. You don't look at her as a woman, you look at her as an experiment. And that's all I could really say about that. I'm gonna continue looking more into about this. So yeah, and that's it. That's part one of this video, because I got some stuff to do. So this is part one. Part two of this video is gonna be coming real soon. Thank you guys so much. Stay safe.